dickheads. We're back. I'm back. Shouldn't say we, it's just me. Back with another night. We're getting so close to episode 99 of Private Dicks, Quest for the Holy Grail. I can taste it. We only have a few more nights left. And I'm going to continue weekly until I catch up. We'll do this whole thing wrapped up by the end of the summer, hopefully. Today, we're going to talk about the older of the Gaul boys, Sir Boys the Younger. We talked about Lionel last week. And this episode's going to sound very reminiscent of that. They had a similar upbringing, probably a bunch of similar information. That's okay. But before we get into Sir Bors the Younger, or Sir Bors de Ganis, let's talk about the lie I told last week. Now it's time for disclaimer, like I do in every one of these episodes. If this is the first episode of my series on the Knights of the Round Table, I suggest you go back to the start and listen to all the episodes I did before this. Starting with the King Arthur episodes of Private Dicks, episode 59 and 60, and listen to each of the knights after that, in order. I know, it's a pretty big homework assignment, but you'll be happy I suggested it. In these episodes, we are in the Studilian cycle of the Arthurian legend, so let's say I'm taking a few liberties with these stories. I researched these on the internet for about a week or so, maybe a little bit more, and pass on any info I found. Plus, I add a little something. And all of these stories are basically just fan fiction from people 1,000 years ago. So why can't I just add to the legend? It's my show, and if I want to provide new information, why can't I? Lying to you, to me, is the funniest part about these episodes. And I don't do it to be malicious. I do it in hopes that my made-up portion of the episode somehow makes it into another person's version, and then another person's, and then another person's, until it becomes part of the legend. So I'll go through what I learned, add my part, and I'll tell you what I added, and then we'll wrap it up until next episode. And I won't tell you what I added until that next episode. So I'm just going to let it lay for a week or so until you come back and figure out which one I was bullshitting about. So that's the part of the episode we do now. The lie told this episode, or the last episode, I guess, was about Sir Lionel being good with a bow and saving Arthur from assassination. That whole thing, it was all made up. But it was a good story, right? It was like, I don't know, they kind of just breezed over how Lionel got to be a knight. So I thought, why not make up a story? Lionel's kind of boring otherwise, to be truthful. So, yeah, made that part up. The rest of it, already part of the legend. The Eye of Camelot. All my bullshit. Now that that's over with, let's get to the main knight for today. Sir Bors de Ganis.
An elite team of private detectives.
What if balloons are aliens? Maybe that's the key component we're missing.
Cover-ups.
John's guilty.
Mysteries that need to be solved.
Maybe Mormons need mountains.
Richard, shut up.
Sir Bors de Ganis, Bors the Younger, was the older brother, he was the younger brother of Sir Lionel. He isn't just called Sir Bors the Younger because he's a younger brother, more because he is a junior. His dad was named Bors as well, and people called him Bors the Elder. I think this is a good opportunity for all of us to get rid of the old junior senior thing. I think I talked about this last episode, and we could just move back to younger elder. I got a buddy who's John Jr. Most people just call him JJ. Nah, dude, you are John the Younger, and we're gonna call you JY or Jai. John the Younger, John the Elder. I like it much better. I feel like if I sat here and thought about this, it'd be funny, but it's not really that funny. It's just I like it more than Junior. It's the same basic backstory as last time. Bors has, as Lionel. So I'll just copy and paste it from my last script. And that was my original plan. I was just going to copy and paste it. But after doing some research on Bors, I can't even copy and paste. I learned a bit more about both Bors and Lionel's young life, so I'm going to have to add it in a bit here. So some of the stuff might sound the same, but I have to add a bunch of stuff. So Bors the Younger is the child of King Bors of Gaul and Yvain, or Elaine in some of them. Gaul is France, or a part of France anyway, modern day France. King Bors the Elder had a brother named Ban, who was also a king. And both boys, Ban and Bors, were early allies to King Arthur. Both kings, I guess. They weren't really boys. And they were allies in the early wars against the rebel kings who were trying to usurp the young Arthur, whom they thought didn't deserve to be king. Ban was also Lancelot's father, making Bors the Ganis Lancelot's cousin. Bors the Younger is the older brother to Lionel. Ban and Bors Sr., Bors the Elder, agreed to help Arthur if Arthur was to help them fight against the evil king Claudas, who was threatening Gaul, their kingdom. And Arthur agrees to this. But Arthur gets there too late and Claudas's invasion succeeds. And Claudas kills both Ban and Bors the Elder to secure his legitimacy as the king of Gaul. And this is where my story has to diverge a little bit from what I gave you last time. When I started reading Boar stuff, I found out more, and it's much more of a fun story than what I told you happened in the Lionel story. Now, you might think this is where I'm going to take the opportunity to lie. I'm not. I'm telling you, I learned some more, so I'm adding to the story. This is actually part of the legend. I told you Bors, Lionel, and Lancelot escaped with the help of Nimue, the Lady of the Lake. This wasn't exactly true. It wasn't false. It just wasn't exactly true. There's a big gap there that I missed. Lancelot escapes with Nimue, and the other two were given to another knight named Farion to grow up in Gaul in the court, but under Claudas's rule. Farion was a loyal knight to King Bors, the Elder, for years. They had recently had a falling out, and King Bors had banished Farion for killing another knight. It was a revenge killing, but Bors didn't allow his knights to kill each other without a trial. Farion felt bad over the whole situation and took his banishment like he should have. Didn't resist at all. He gathered up his wife, his unnamed wife, and their two children, and they all leave. Their two children's names are Anguins and Tantane. Anguins and Tantane both become great knights. I might touch on them at some point, but I'm trying to get through the knights that hit the Holy Grail here. So maybe at some point we'll get to them, but not right now. So Farion and family leave to Claudas's kingdom, where Farion joins up. He would have rather stayed with Bors the Elder and their gang, but he understood that living in banishment was a fair punishment for his crime. But Farion was in the army that invaded Gaul, and after Bors and Ban were killed at the hand of his new king, he knew that he had to get the widow of Ban and their children to safety before Claudas found them. I guess it was the widow of Ban and Bors, both their widows and their children to safety before they found him. But since we're talking about Lionel and Bors, we're talking about Bors Sr. right now. So he had to get Bors Sr.'s kids and wife, or ex, or widow, I guess, to safety. The kids, Lionel was 21 months and Bors was 9 months, respectively. I'm getting kind of confused here who the older one is. I'm pretty sure it's Lionel's the older one, Bors the younger one, but I'll get to that. If I screw this up, I'm sorry. They're 21 months and 9 months old, respectively. Farion took the woman and the two babies and he hid them in a monastery. Claudas had an affair with Farion's unnamed wife a little bit later on. They'd been cheating for some time, and she ends up telling Claudas about the young princes. This was about 10 to 12 years after Gaul had been sacked. He didn't even know Bors had children up to this point. Claudas, wanted the two young princes to die, or at least get banished further away. They were 12 and 14 at the time. So Claudas sends his cruel son Doran to capture the kids. Doran was just an 18-year-old kid himself, but he told his father he could capture the princes and get rid of them. He wanted to impress his king father, which is understandable. It must be hard to be a prince, especially if you have a dad who is a conqueror. You want to just be as good as he is. So Doran questions town, goes to the monastery looking for the kids. He gets real close. He invades the monastery because he assumes they're there. He hadn't seen them anywhere else, and Doran doesn't visit the monastery very often. So it was his biggest clue. Bors and I guess Lionel had been hiding while he was sacking the monastery, and they'd been hiding in a closet when Doran bursts in. Bors had a knife drawn ready to kill the kid. I guess he's an 18-year-old man. He's not a kid anymore, but Bors was ready. He was 12, I believe, maybe a 10. Then Lionel comes from behind and clubs Doran in the head. It wasn't meant to be a mortal wound, but it was. And just as the kids realized what they had done, Farion came in looking for them. He knew his wife had betrayed him and were coming to save the kids, but the kids had already saved themselves. More like, maybe not saved, more like bought themselves some more time. Farion knew he had to get help to save the kids this time. He wasn't going to be able to get them out of town by himself. Claudius would never stop looking now, and he would have patrols going through the roof. So he goes to Avalon by himself, leaves the kids with a friend of his, and they hide in a farmhouse in the woods. And he goes to Avalon by himself and summons the Lady of the Lake and asks her for her help. Nimue sends a representative of Avalon named Vivain back to Gaul with Farion to bring the kids back. Thankfully, the kids were still hiding at the farmhouse, and they escape with what seems to be little trouble. The Lady of the Lake takes Lionel, Bors the Younger, and Lancelot to her underwater kingdom and raises them there. We'll cover that more in the Lancelot episode because that's where Lancelot spent his entire youth. When they get old enough, all three of them become knights. They all have to prove themselves worthy of becoming a knight of the Round Table, which wasn't hard. The training in Avalon was the best of the best. Bors was the quiet one of the group, the wise one, let's say. But he was also a fierce warrior. He was knighted at a very young age, around 19. One of the first quests that Sir Bors went on for Arthur was to be an emissary of the Britons. He was actually the fourth of a four-person group. Arthur sent Gawain as the leader, Bedivere, who we haven't spoken about yet, and Lionel as well. So some pretty heavy hitters when it comes to knights. We know that Gawain was one of the bigger of the knights, and Bedivere, we've all heard his name at some point. Now, maybe Lionel and Bors weren't big, but those two were pretty heavy hitters. They were to go to Emperor Lucius and demand that he leave with his armies back to Rome and never come back to Great Britain again. It was a tall task, but it had to be done. Arthur wanted to avoid a fight with the Romans. He had a huge army, but he didn't want to fight. He wanted to end this amicably. So the four knights arrive at Lucius's war camp on horseback, hoping to talk to the emperor himself. They get met with a, yeah, no, you're not talking with the emperor. I speak on his behalf. So Gawain accepts that, goes into the tent with Lucius's emissary, and Gawain delivers the message, pretty much word for word. Never return to Britain again. Turn around. The other three stay outside of the tent on their horses. Gawain's offer is wholly refused, and Gawain has a bit of a temper tantrum. He draws his sword and maims the emissary on the cheek, cutting his face right open. And after this quick blow, Gawain runs out of the tent, tells his friends to run, and they clip-clop away on their horses. Bors doesn't really know what the hell has happened, and as he's running away, he kind of looks back at the army charging out at them, but they're charging on foot. Nobody really is on a horse yet, so they're losing ground. But Bors, instead of just escaping like he could easily, he stops his horse, turns it around, and charges at the Roman foot soldiers. He smashes the man in front and kills him instantly with a spear through the chest. The men following stop in shock. Bors turns around on his horse and follows his fellow knights. And they all escape magically. But Bors just had to turn around and kill someone. He just wanted to prove a point, like, we're still the Knights of the Round Table. I don't care if you chase us. We will fight back. Lucius didn't take this very well. And that's how the war with the Romans started, with Gawain and Bors stirring the pot. Arthur does defeat the Romans easily enough. If I'm to summarize it, pretty one-sided. During the war with the Romans, Bors joins the heavy cavalry and is appointed personal guard for King Arthur himself. The war was a few years long, and this is when Bors became good friends with most of the Knights of the Round Table. None more than Gawain. They were the best of friends. Another weird fact about Bors decides, as a way to prove his worthiness to God and his knighthood, and his king, I guess, is to take a vow of celibacy. He says he will do good deeds for the sake of doing good deeds, not to get in some damsel's panties. I think that's exactly a quote. It was a perfect quote right there. Many of the stories about Sir Bors de Ganis revolve around him being celibate. Many times his celibacy was tested. The first test I could find was when he won a tournament at the court of King Bandagor of Estrangor. I love these old names, it's so crazy. King of Brandangor of Estragor. Usually the prize for these tournaments was the king's daughter in marriage. This time, the prize actually has a name. Her name is Claire. Bors was celibate, and he just fought for the sake of fighting, for victory, to be the guy, and he wins. But when he wins, he refuses the gift of Claire. Not long after the tournament was done, Brandagor sends word to Camelot requesting a knight to save his daughter Claire from a giant that had kidnapped her. Arthur knew that Bors recently won a tournament there, and he thought that it was the best person to send to the castle for aid. And Bors goes out and does his duty. He saves the Princess Claire from the clutches of the evil giant. But after the save, Claire is even more hot for Bors. If she wasn't already super sexed up waiting to fuck him after he won that tournament, she was now. He saved her life. I gotta have this guy. He refuses again. She then says, "Okay, Sir Bors, if you won't have me, will you please take this as a reward?" It was a ring. It was a magic ring that would trick the wearer into falling in love with whomever gave it to them. But it was a ring nonetheless. And he said, yeah, he didn't know it was magic. So he takes it in lieu of the wife, and he falls in love with Claire. And she convinces him that they were lovers. And he bones her, breaking his celibacy. He bones her once. And this was weeks after Bors had left to save Claire, and Arthur was getting worried. So Arthur, back at Camelot, sends Lancelot to figure out what has been going on. And as soon as Lancelot gets to the kingdom, or to the castle, sorry, he hears from the guards that Bors had taken up with Claire and was with her in her tower. Lancelot knocks on the door to the princess's quarters, and Bors was there, madly in love. Lancelot instantly knew something was up, so he takes his friend to another room to speak with him privately. And Bors is smitten. All he can talk about is Claire this, Claire that. Man, I love Claire. Don't you love Claire? Knowing that this isn't Bors' MO, he looks for anything different on his friend, and the ring was the only thing he could think of. So Lancelot waits until the middle of the night, slips into Bors' room, and takes the ring off his cousin's finger. The next day, Bors hadn't remembered where he'd been for the past few weeks. They confront Claire. She admits that the ring was magic and what it had done to him. Lancelot pulls a sword in anger, but the king stops him from killing his daughter. As she weeps at the feet of Bors, she tells him that he's going to be a father. So they agree not to kill her. So Bors is a dad, even though he was the celibate knight. He only had sex once. He has a son. His name was Aelian the White, and was quite the knight in his own right. He ends up being the king of Constantinople. But that's another night that I'm going to cover another day, maybe. We'll see how I feel. I might just continue doing nights forever. Who knows? There's another story that revolves around Bors' celibacy. Bors is hanging out one of those Camelot towers. He's just chilling there, maybe praying. I think he was praying. And some super hot woman and her maidens interrupt his praying. She says that she wants Bors to sleep with her. Like, let's do it. You know, she's a temptress. And Bors refuses. I'm celibate, you know this. When he refuses, she threatens to throw herself off of the tower. Sleep with me or I kill myself. Bors just stops and starts to pray higher, louder, closes his eyes. The woman instructs one of her handmaidens to throw herself off the tower to prove that she is serious. Bors continues to pray. Another jumps, then another, then finally the original temptress jumps herself. Bors prays through all of it, and as soon as the women fall, they all turn into demons and phase away back into hell. Bors proved his vow of celibacy was real, and God was pleased, I think. He thinks. That's all that matters. Then this is where we kind of jump back into the Grail story. Bors joins his brother Lionel, Galahad, and Percival on their hunt for the elusive Holy Grail. During the first bit of this quest, they separate for a bit. Lionel and Bors take one side and the other two take the other. Lionel and Bors are attacked by some wicked knights. During the fight, Bors is faced with an impossible decision. We talked about it last episode. His brother Lionel is overpowered by some of these knights and is being dragged off in one direction. In the other direction, there was a maiden who had also been captured by a wicked knight. She was a virgin. Oh no. The maiden, I don't know if that's dramatic. I don't know if the maiden's a virgin. Bors is faced with the choice of either saving his brother or some maiden he didn't know. Now, Bors knew that Lionel was a tough knight and probably would survive this whole ordeal. The maiden, on the other hand, was probably gonna die, or at very least raped, and had no hopes of survival without the help of Bors. So Bors prays for his brother, then goes to save the woman. When he finally catches up to the maiden and her captor, he dispatches them quite easily. The maiden is forever grateful, but Bors never knows that because he immediately runs off to help his brother, but his brother is nowhere to be found. Bors can't get back on their tail. So he goes where he thinks that the kidnappers would have went and follows some tracks out of town into the woods surrounding it. Then he walks around aimlessly until he runs into an old man preaching the Bible. And Bors loved talking Jesus, so for him this must have been a great thing to run into, was this old man. And as Bors is speaking with the homeless religious dude, Lionel pops out of the forest. He's injured but armed. He's also very angry. Bors is in shock too and opens up his arm for a hug with his lost brother. I'm glad you survived, he says. Lionel's pissed, and he kills Sir Calangrant and the homeless dude that Bors was riding with. Sir Calangrant was also out there looking for Lionel with Bors, I guess. They don't really mention, they just say he kills him at the, like they kills both of them. They don't really say where they met up, which is kind of a weird thing to do. Like they just add extra nights, I guess, for dramatic effect. So he's standing over the dead body of his fellow knight and a homeless religious guy. And Lionel still has his sword drawn, and he raises it in anger toward his brother. Bors still refuses to fight. And just as Lionel's finally about to get his final blow, God intervenes and strikes Lionel down with a pillar of fire. This fire just paralyzes Lionel and stops him from being able to kill his brother. After God gets in there, Lionel instantly realizes what a huge mistake he was about to make and he repents. And he tries to reconcile with Bors, and Bors accepts the apology quite easily, freely. Like not even giving a shit that Lionel just killed a hermit and another knight of the round table. He literally just helps Lionel bury the bodies. And Lionel stays at the gravesite to repent some more. Bors goes back and finds Galahad and Percival to go find the Grail again. And like I said, the Grail quest will finish that story as we go. But I will tell you this, spoiler alert, Bors is the only one to return alive after seeing the Holy Grail and its majesty. Then comes the division of knights, the battle between Lancelot and Arthur. Bors decides to side with his cousin Lancelot, even though Lancelot is a traitor and adulterer. Bors is one of the knights that helped save Guinevere from being burned at the stake. Lionel and Bors become one of the bigger reasons Lancelot wins this war with his friend Arthur. Bors survives a horseback duel with Gawain during one of the battles. Bors also has an opportunity to kill Arthur during one of these battles, but is waved off by Lancelot. Bors had a clear shot at Arthur, whom had been unhorsed and only held a sword. And I'm guessing Lancelot waved him off because he wanted to kill Arthur himself. After the war, he wanted to kill Arthur himself. Lancelot already killed a bunch of knights. Now I guess King Arthur is like the final boss, and he doesn't even end up doing it. Arthur just ends up, Mordred ends up killing Arthur. Lancelot just kind of, I guess he still had respect for each other. But after the skirmishes, the war, I guess, Lancelot goes into hiding, but not before crowning Lionel King of France, King of Gaul, I guess, and bestowing all of Claudas' kingdom to Bors. While the fighting is going on, Lancelot out of the picture, Mordred kills Arthur. Lancelot decides this is when he's going to help his old friend, but he arrives too late. The war is finally over. Lancelot disappears again, and there's a huge army doing nothing. Bors sends them home and goes on a search for Lancelot. A few years later, and a couple of 100 miles ridden, Bors finds Lancelot in a monastery as a practicing priest. Bors tells Lancelot about Meliot, Mordred's son, who is plaguing their lands in Camelot. Lancelot agrees to go back with Bors if he comes back with him afterwards to become a priest. Bors and Lancelot go back to Camelot and kill Mordred's kids together. Then they head back to do their holy work. Bors gives up everything he has to live at an abbey with Lancelot. Years later, as an older man, The ex-knights of the Round Table hear about the impending crusade. They want to join the cause, kill some Muslims. They're heavy Christians, and Muslims are dirty, dirty people. My God. Both Lancelot and Bors die in Turkey trying to kill Muslims. While they didn't survive the Crusades, many Muslims died. Poetic that Bors dies on Good Friday. It was a fitting end to these wankers, fighting as an old man in a racist ass war. Now, the only question I have for this episode is why can't rich old assholes who want to do some racist ass crimes go die fighting their own war? I wish they did that these days. Maybe some of them would be eliminated, and that would be the end of that. Like this, the end of Sir Bors de Ganis. All right, I hope you guys like that episode. I love doing these nights. I got a couple more, probably 3, I think, more before we start 2 big ones. So before we do the real episode, we got 2, maybe 3 more, and I think 3 more, maybe even 4. But there's gonna be a couple more, and then we're gonna do the whole Knights of the Round Table, and it'll be over. If you guys like the episode, go rate, review the podcast. Email me if you want to ask any questions at privatedicksdetectiveagency@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, guys. Come back next week for another night. Peace.
I just watched Private Dicks and I think RJ's the funniest.
What? Come on.